So welcome everybody. My name is Stephanie Slater and I'm founder and chief executive at School Food Matters. I just want to thank everybody for registering today. It's a very popular webinar. As I just mentioned while you were coming in, we've got over 400 people registered for this 1 hour we have together. I need to tell you all that the webinar is being recorded. So if you don't want to be seen, please turn your cameras off. And I'm just going to quickly walk you through the agenda. So we're going to have rapid fire contributions from our experts and leading names in school food. And then there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. Audience members can submit their questions through the Q&A. So you will see that at the bottom of your screen and you can submit a question. Any questions that we're unable to answer in the time we have together will be answered after the webinar. So your questions won't be lost and we'll be getting back to you if you identify yourself to go through any questions that you have. So first to the report, the cost of a school meal. Why now? I guess I need to explain briefly that we came up with the idea of commissioning this work because we were coming towards the end of a 5-year programme called Healthy Zones, looking at school food policy and school food practice. And one of the barriers we kept on coming up against were schools, caterers telling us there just wasn't enough money in the system for them to guarantee there'll be good nutrition on the plate of children. So we decided to dig deep into the data and have a look at what the numbers were telling us. And it is the first time this piece of work has been done in over 10 years since the school food plan and the introduction of universal infant-free school meals. So this is a timely moment. The most important thing I want to say today is that although the focus today is funding of school meals, it cannot be seen in isolation. We need to look at the whole school food system and consider funding, access to school meals, and of course, quality. We hear a lot in the press about quality. But today we're looking at funding. It's become quite timely because the House of Lords very kindly decided to publish their report, their inquiry of the Food, Diet and Obesity Committee, and their findings echo what we're going to be talking about today. I'd like to say that it was by design they published today, but it is a happy accident and we will be reflecting on that. And as I said, this is one of the first times in over 10 years since the school food plan that we have come together to look at the problem of funding. And we brought together a project advisory group chaired by Brad Pearce, who we'll be hearing from later. And we commissioned the hard work, the data, to be done by Bremner and Co. and Cohesion Consulting. And thankfully, Miles and Abigail from Bremner and Co. are going to be talking to us later if we have any tricky questions about methodology and data sets. So I will refer again to the House of Lords report because they came out with some pretty punchy language about funding, and they even said they were appalled to learn that there wasn't enough money to support good nutrition and called for an immediate review of funding for free school meals. And why does it matter? Okay, we're asked this a lot. Why it matters is because school meals present an unrivaled opportunity to provide the good nutrition children need to thrive, to support their health and learning. And investing in school meals offers a really clear route to breaking down barriers to opportunity. The new Labour government talks about breaking down barriers to opportunity. And here is the moment. So if we look at school food, we can really make a giant step towards the Labour government's missions. And of course, we're coming up to a budget. I'd like to think that this report would change what's going to be in the red attaché case come the 30th of October. Could be a little optimistic. But what we do know is that the new government is supporting breakfast clubs, which is a really, really big step towards contributing to children's health through school food. But we need to get to hear from the experts. You've heard enough from me. So our first speaker, I'm sure many of you will know Sharon Hodgson. Sharon is Labour MP for Washington and Gateshead South and a vocal advocate for better school food, including through her leadership of the all-party parliamentary group for school food. So I'm going to give Sharon her 5 minutes and along. Thank you very much, Sharon, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And hi, everyone. And thank you for coming along today to recognise the monumental work that's been put in across the sector to get us to where we are today. And as chair of the School Food All-Party Parliamentary Group, since its inception back in 2010, this report ticks a lot of the boxes that we've been talking about for quite some time. There are so many brilliant people and organisations who've worked on this report, and I would like to pay tribute to all of their efforts. It's wonderful to see that the school food sector has come together for the first time in more than 10 years to author this brilliant report. I've been asked to bring the political angle into this, so I'm going to quickly outline what the government is currently doing in the school food sector. So the new Labour government intends to raise the healthiest generation of children in our history. And this is reflected in our plans for fully funded breakfast clubs, which we have seen improve behaviour, attendance and learning in places like Wales, where this policy has been in place since 2004. So breakfast clubs are also seen to ease pressure on parents in this cost of living crisis and break down barriers to opportunity. But as we all know, and as this report outlines, there can always be more done to support children. And as chair of the School Food All-Party Group, I've long campaigned, as you all know, for universal free school meals as a method of eliminating inequality at lunchtime. And I will be sure to share the findings of this report in Parliament, particularly on addressing the funding gap for school meals. The last decade has marked a decline in schools' ability to provide nutritious options for their pupils, and I would like to see a return to, if there ever was one, a funding gold standard. I'm sure that the meals were funded so much better than they are now. And the report outlines that it's 63 pence per meal, per school meal more that is needed to be the most suitable funding rate for ideal provision. And in terms of what we can do as a sector, we can build on the momentum of change which has been pushed forward by the new government. And I think this report does go a long way to offer some specific asks. And in a perfect world, the government would be able to fulfill all of these asks which seek to make school food more nutritious, delicious and sustainable. Well, this funding gap that the report highlights is a very concerning one, and I will be sure to keep this in mind going forward, particularly when addressing the issue of stability across the sector. And I know so many of you have pointed out that we really can't expand the number of children getting school food at this current funding level. And I do take that seriously into account. So the new Labour government is considering all the options going into this Parliament on how we can improve children's health. There are some really effective and low-cost solutions in this report, like ring-fencing school food budgets and especially auto-enrolment, which we've seen some local authorities do brilliantly, and I'm always banging on about that. These would have a huge impact, and I realise are the most attractive to a treasury left with a now up to, we hear, £40 billion black holes. Seems to be growing ever bigger by the previous government left us. So since setting up the School Food All-Party Group in 2010, I know how important this issue is for both children and parents. So we should absolutely continue to be ambitious about the solutions and really face up to the scale of the challenge of school food. And so I applaud the report for seeking real change, which will make every child's school food experience better. And I think it's important that everyone reads this report and continues to fight for better quality and fairer school food provision. And I will be certain to share this crucial piece of work with my colleagues in Parliament and continue my non-stop advocacy for this cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you for your continued work in this area. I've been an absolute pleasure to have been on the All Party Group since 2010. So keep going. That's all I can
Will
say.
do.
So moving right along, what we want to do now is dig into the report a little bit, and who better to do that with than Bethan Cullen. So Bethan is the Deputy CEO of the Institute of School Business Leaders, known as ISBL. And as a national professional body that supports school business leaders, she works closely with leaders across the school food sector. And Bethan has been very much part of the advisory group to put together this report. So I thank you for your work and look forward to having a conversation with you, Bethan.
Thanks, Stephanie.
So should we just start? I just want to hear what you got out of this process and what you think the top 3 takeaways from the report were. And were you surprised by any of the findings?
I think, disappointingly, I suppose we should say we weren't surprised by the findings because it's what our members have been telling us for a number of years. I think school food is central to the delivery of a school being effective. I think we saw that in the pandemic, didn't we? That schools were central to ensuring many potentially deprived children were fed during that period, and they really stood up and took centre stage during that period. So we weren't surprised by them, and they really resonated with us, and we were delighted that the report demonstrated that need for further investment in school food. Members have been telling us for at least the last 5 years there have been significant challenges in both creating the income needed to maintain that delivery quality, which is what we've been talking about earlier. It's been making it harder for them to align costs and income. The current funding process for school meals means that schools can often see a shortfall in the income they receive compared to the provision they need to provide. This can be due to when the census data is collected, the number of children that are registered for universal infant free school meals, taking a meal on that day, children that are registered for free school meals. That really makes a big difference to the income that is received by a school. As pupils aren't registered, when they're registered for universal infant free school meals, they often then parents don't understand that they also need to register for free school meals at that point. And that's where we would really advocate for auto enrolment. And I know that is part of the key findings in this report. And we would really like to see that rolled out more widely. We know that it's had high benefit in the regions that have been trialling it, but it would really help the administration of schools and in turn the ability to bring in wider income, which would then allow them to improve and support the quality of food delivery. It really is important that schools receive all of the related funding so that they can make sure that they're prioritising school meals. As the report has shown, we are seeing school meal costs exceed the income that is being received, and we want to ensure with the pressures that our members are telling us, which is both on the inflationary pressures on food itself, we've seen rising costs related to staff and the delivery of those meals. Recruitment and retention is a real issue for schools at the moment, retaining people to help support the delivery of school food. And then also utility rises. The schools are seeing the pressures on all sides, and they want to and are committed to ensuring the quality of the food provision within their schools, but they are seeing these rising pressures. So we were pleased to see that the report acknowledged that there was this widening gap in both the income being received and the costs in delivery.
That's really...
Sorry, I was going to say, and I think my biggest concern was that schools are having to subsidise that. So we are seeing schools literally look at income generation opportunities so that they aren't seeing that impact and they're closing that gap on delivery. So I was judging the National School Awards for this year, and many of the school business leaders were going above and beyond, looking at how they could generate income and putting that investment back into school food. That was looking at things like delivering additional services, but also additional support on delivery of their meals.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting your comment about auto enrollment, Beth. And we saw the BBC pick up this story this week, didn't we, about um, the number of children that are missing out, and it disproportionately affects marginalised families. So, really, really interesting point. So, why do you think this report matters now? I mean, isn't it interesting that the Laws have landed their report today and it all comes together? So, what is that's happening now in schools that's particularly pertinent?
I think it's the wider funding pressures. So I think particularly for schools, they're feeling pressures across all parts of their budget, and where they may have been able to support and subsidise through other activities, they aren't able to do that in the same way. So their pressures are on all sides. Funding is particularly difficult for schools. We're seeing recruitment and retention crisis in our schools. There are constant pressures. And I think school business leaders are really concerned about delivering balanced budget. And therefore, then they're having to make difficult decisions across all resources. And we don't want school food to be one of those areas where they're having difficult decisions. I know the report breaks down the cost of a school meal and we look at overheads, but just we've talked in the past about provisions of tables, cutlery. That school food involves a lot of delivery mechanics, and schools want to ensure that they have the ability to maintain high quality. School business leaders advocate and understand the importance of attainment being related to a high quality school food meal. And therefore, they want to ensure that they're not having to reduce the quality of that service. I think the other reason that we're seeing pressure at the moment is, and I'm sure Brad will come on to this, is about the fact that we're seeing catering suppliers starting to tell our school business leaders, we're not sure we're going to be able to retender to deliver the service for you. Therefore, school leaders are concerned about who is going to be helping them to deliver this quality service within their schools because of the rising pressures on price. You know, we're seeing in some regions people being served notice on their existing contracts. So they are concerned about what the future of school food looks like and how they're going to be able to maintain the delivery and the quality of that delivery. So we really think it's a timely report to help people be laser focused on the fact that there is this widening gap between income and the associated cost. And we need to be working together collectively to ensure that doesn't have an impact on the pupils in our schools and in turn their attainment.
Really, really, really good point. Because you and I have been talking about school food funding for many, many years. I think in 2020 we worked on a piece together about how funding flows into schools, and there's such complexity, and we really do understand that school business leaders can often struggle to work out where the income streams come up. Different initiatives from government come through different funding streams, so I can see this complexity. So we're now in 2024. And do your members tell you what they need to make the school food system better? Is it just an increase in funding, or is there something else that could happen?
I think I just reiterate the points we've probably covered. Auto enrolment, I think, would really help schools because I think it's about making sure we are receiving all of the income that schools are entitled to. It, and when I say they're entitled to, their pupils are entitled to. And I think, you know, we need to join up all parts of our system so that we're sharing that data and we're not asking parents to re-enter complex information to our schools, and our schools can act immediately on the provision that they should be providing to those pupils. So I think auto enrolment would be really important. I also think help on procurement, because I think you talk about that in the report, don't you? That it's often very complex and there are long lead times in undertaking catering contracts and working with your suppliers to make sure that you are able to look at the income you're receiving and the costs of delivery and making sure that that food provision is going to be of high quality and high standard. I think it's ensuring that we join up our leadership and we've got governors talking about food standards in our schools and supporting our school leadership in order to deliver high quality and recognise that this is an important part of school life. And I think they do, but I think we just need to make sure that it's front and centre of conversations. And when we're looking at funding and we're looking at attainment, that we are talking about school food.
Great. It's interesting, Bethan, because one of the things that we came out of this is the power of a school food improvement officer in local authorities at local level. that have the expertise, they have the training, they have the understanding of how school food funding works, so that we can make the system work better. And of course, I'm sure everybody on this call understands that free school meal registration attracts pupil premium, which is such an important addition to support children's learning. So lots to think about here, and we've got lots more thoughts coming from more people. So thank you very much, Bethan. We'll continue to work together on this. So I am now going to hand over. We've got a couple of pre-records, some as we call them, our celebrity pre-records. And we are delighted that we've had a couple of heavyweights in this area to give their thoughts on the report and the contents of it. So I'm just going to hand over to the tech people to make this happen.
Hello, my name is Henry Dimbleby. I am the co-author with John Vincent of the School Food Plan, which was an independent review for government published in 2013, and also the co-founder and chair of the charity Chefs in Schools, which goes into schools and aims to help them improve the quality both of the food served and of the education in those schools. I think that this report that's being launched today, Cost of a School Meal by School Food Matters and Impact on Urban Health, is a real step forward in the area. There's some things I think are really interesting about it. I think first of all, the systemic approach in both the work that I did on the School Food Plan and on the National Food Strategy, the importance of really understanding how the system worked and didn't work amongst all the players, trying to break out of the usual siloed narratives is really important. I think it's the way in which this report does that is fascinating. The other thing I think is interesting is that although the focus here is on the cost, the report recognises that cost is just one piece of the equation. In large secondary schools with high take-up, there is enough money in the system, but that doesn't mean the food that's served is great, because that takes care and it takes attention. So I think that the multiple recommendations in this report, realising that again, not only does the understanding of the system need to be broad, but the understanding of the measures that you need to correct the system, you need to come at that and tackle that in multiple different ways. So really a great piece of work, and I would urge anyone who wants to understand how we can improve school meals, which fundamentally is feeding the minds of it's up to 50% of the daily calories for children. It's such a critical part of their growing bodies, laying down the foundations for a healthy life, but also just for concentration and the ability to learn at school. I think this is a really timely report, and I know that time spent reading it will be time well spent. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Kerridge, and I've been a chef for over 30 years. As a child, I was entitled to free school meals, and I'm a huge fan of the principle that every child should have a hot meal during the day at school. It's so obvious that there are only upsides to this. Children who eat healthy free school meals have lower obesity rates, better academic performance and behaviour, and improved lifetime productivity. I've been actively supporting free school meals for several years now, and sincerely hope that the London scheme is rolled out across the rest of England so all primary school children can benefit. I've visited many schools over the years, and the work the catering team do is honestly jaw-dropping, but they are so stretched financially and need help. They really are the unsung heroes in school kitchens. For me, the cost of a school meal report really hammers home how investing just 63p more per school meal can deliver all the benefits I've just mentioned. The report details how the rising cost has led to a gradual increase in the gap between funding and the costs of a school meal. This has consequences for school budgets and risks reducing food quality and access. Please take time to read the report, get active in supporting, so we can once and for all get this sorted.
thank you to Tom and Henry for those two reflections on the report. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be with us today, but we were very pleased to have those comments. So, moving right along, at School Food Matters, we like to go global. So we thought this is a brilliant opportunity to look around the country and, sorry, around the world to see who is making great steps towards getting better nutrition into children. And I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to Leah Gardner. So Leah is Policy Director for Hunger Solutions, and her work in the US influenced the Democratic Vice President nominee and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to expand free school meals across the state. So we can learn much from Leah in relation to the hearts and minds argument about how to convince policymakers that it's worth the investment. So Leah, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to be able to share what we've done in Minnesota and what we hope to see across the United States regarding access to free school meals. So in my work on what we call the Hunger Free Schools campaign here in Minnesota, the thing that I am most proud of is that we really from the very beginning of considering this work, we took the time to get to know those most impacted by a lack of affordable school meals. So we spent time in partnership with organizations that work very closely with youth and their leadership development and talked to them about why it was important to have access to free breakfast and lunch at school. We also talked to parents and particularly focused on parents that we had identified as experiencing food insecurity and our diverse parents across the state and making sure that we knew what this would mean for their families to be able to have no cost meals. And we really used that as the foundation of our entire effort. That's what was in their best interest, and what we heard they needed was really what we kept at the center of all the decisions that we were making. And it did take a few years for us to go from talking about this concept to then we had, of course, the pandemic where the United States as a whole was able to offer temporary free school meals for 2 years. And so that's when we decided we could not go backwards and we needed to make a hard push to have free breakfast and lunch for all of our students permanently. So we did start that work, I believe in 2020, and then it passed in 2023. So over the course of those 3 years, I will tell you from the very beginning of the campaign, we did not know how soon it would happen that we had the political environment to make this happen. It felt very much like a long shot and something that was going to take maybe a decade, quite a number of years to build the support that we needed on this. And what we really were focused on, again, is building that foundation and having the stories and a variety of spokespeople that could build the case for this. And the nice thing about that is that we were able to move at the speed of trust in getting to know our various stakeholders, and especially for our youth and our parents that were experiencing food insecurity, to build a real authentic relationship with them so that when we got to the point where we needed them to speak with media or speak with lawmakers, we had a strong relationship and we were able to support them because although they wanted to share their stories, it is a heavy load for them to carry. So we were able to get to know them really well and support them along the way. And then when our moment finally came where we realized that we had the political will to get this done, they were well practiced. They were very comfortable speaking on this, and we had very strong relationships where we could talk through whether or not somebody felt comfortable in various scenarios. We also had a really diverse coalition. So honestly, we had partners who don't agree on much of anything besides that they wanted to see free school meals. So that was really important to have a very broad table working on this and bring in everybody that we could. Just a few quick highlights. We've now seen that this work is paying off in a very big way. We've been surveying families, and they are saying they have more food at home as a result of this. The students are attending school more regularly. They're doing better in school, and they have an increased sense of belonging, and overall they are eating healthier. So we are just beginning to understand the impacts here in Minnesota, but we know that the impact is real, and we'll continue to study that more thoroughly so that we can share that with everyone else working on a similar effort. And last but not least, I want to again do a nod to our governor here in Minnesota, Governor Walz, who is now vice presidential candidate and helping to build the momentum for this effort across the entire country. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. That is a really inspiring story. And I guess what I took from that is the importance of listening, hearing the stories of those most affected by policy. And I guess in respect to funding for schools, the people we should be listening to are really senior leaders in schools who are seeing the impact of underfunding. So that really provides me with the perfect segue to our next speaker. So thank you, Leah. And I'm going to move on to Steve Chalk. So Steve is the founder of Oasis, the Oasis Academies, and a UK's largest provider of academy schools, educating over 32,000 children through its family of 52 academies, and has seen how underfunding impacts on children. So I'm going to hand over to Steve for some comments about the report. Thank you, Steve.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Well, the first thing to say actually is a giant thank you to the whole School Matters team and to you for this report, because I think it is a brilliant piece of work and a much needed piece of work. You know, good nutrition is a recipe, as we all know, for success. Therefore, good nutrition for children is a real investment. And I would demonstrate that from our day-to-day experience. We know scientifically, brain science tells us, neuroscience tells us, that if a child is healthy and there's good nutrition, their brain will develop differently to a child's brain that doesn't have good nutrition. So good nutrition leads on to good education, and it leads on to great life chances. It leads on to opportunity. But without good nutrition, we know scientifically, I say that again, it's not an opinion, it's not a view, it's the science, brain science, neuroscience. Without good nutrition, regulation is therefore difficult, which means behavior breaks down. And when a child's behavior breaks down, it doesn't just disrupt their education, but the education of all the children around them, the whole class. Without good nutrition, we know that a child finds it very hard to concentrate or stay concentrated. And we also know this, that once concentration goes, engagement goes, of course, and once engagement goes, attainment falls apart. And once attainment falls apart, attendance tends to fall apart. And once attendance is gone, then that child is open on their housing estate or wherever it is to be groomed, to be coerced, to be drawn into crime, drawn into drugs, drawn into violence. So if you look at this government's brilliant priorities, a priority about ending persistent absenteeism from school. Where I am right now, a school, it's not an Oasis school, but we have developed a scheme here to work with children around their nutrition and around their food, teaching them to cook, teaching them to work together. But a school just down the road, primary school, their persistent absenteeism rate is 38%. 38% of children are not in school on a regular basis, missing for more than 10% of the time. The government wants to tackle persistent absenteeism. It wants to tackle poor behaviour. We heard this morning in the news as well, Stephanie, aside from the House of Lords report, about education health care plans and how the parents are determined to get these but can't get them because children are not, their child isn't learning well in school. We know about mental health and the government's ambitious targets around that, around gangs, around crime, about halving knife crime, about halving knife violence. So here's the thing. 25% of all children are living with a dietary related disease by the age of 10. It's not just their physical health, though, it's their mental health. And we see that every day in our schools. And in some cases, it's not just that they have these diseases by the age of 10, they live with them. So they hamper them through life. In some cases, in some places where we work, the average lifespan of the poorest is up to 17, this is the worst case, 17.4 years shorter than the richest in that community. And we work with the poorest children in our schools across the country. We are responsible, of course, as schools, as Henry picked up really, for 50% of a child's nutrition. Oasis actually runs 53 schools, not 52, but the 53rd is different. It's called a secure school. It's an alternative to a youth jail, alternative to Feltham or ISIS. It's therapeutic, it's caring. But we supply there 100% of children's nutrition. And we know that their brain development, not just through childhood, but through adolescence, is dependent on all of that. So what I want to say as I close is simply this, that good food for children is a policy that pays and pays and pays. It saves money on health, on justice, on benefits, on social care. It just makes sense. It's worth investing in. And the first task of any and every society must be the future of its economy. So therefore, to invest in school meals, to invest in good nutrition, well, it's an investment worth making every time.
Thank you so much, Steve. So well put, and always reminding us why we're here, which is to focus on the children at the heart of this report, on making sure they get the good nutrition they deserve to thrive. Our last speaker and chair of our project advisory group is Brad Pearce. Brad is Managing Director of CaterEd and Vice Chair-elect of LASA, the School Food People. And he has fought for the interests of those on the front lines in schools catering for many, many years. And obviously with CaterEd, he has first-hand experience of what it's like out there at the moment. So Brad, I invite you to give us some reflections on the report.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I was asked to do it from a caterer's point of view. I am Managing Director of CaterEd, providing school lunches across Plymouth, South East Cornwall and into West Devon. Stephanie said I'm Vice Chair-elect of LASA, the School Food People, which has members across England and Wales. I was also chair of this project advisory group. So from our point of view, CaterEd is a cooperative and we're unique. We're owned by 67 schools and the council. And our uniqueness is that all the schools, maintained academies and multi-academy trusts, have for almost 10 years worked together to commit and so share their budgets for school food to level the landscape and remove the disparity of funding, which is currently based on levels of deprivation of free school meal eligibility. It's fair to say that while school dinners may be visible to those who work in schools, I think school catering itself is probably one of the least understood services. And after all, it's just food on a plate, isn't it? Don't we all do that every day at home? Well, the simple fact is that no, we don't. we don't work on the scale and under the cost pressures that we face and have faced as school caterers for a number of years. For my business alone, we're producing just short of 2.5 million meals a year. 12,500 children will have been fed in Plymouth today by my team. And that comes with significant pressure to ensure that on a daily basis, the ingredients of a successful operation, food, labour, efficient kitchen estate, are all in place. And remember that the funding received for free school meals and universal free school meals is not just for food and ingredients. This current 253 or 258 needs to cover everything from sourcing and ordering of the ingredients, the delivery, the preparation and cooking, the serving, and clear down for returning the often multi-use dining space to schools after lunch. We also know, as others have said, that for many children, the school lunch can be the only hot meal they have each day, and also the one opportunity to build the social and communication skills. Over the last 2 or 3 years, all providers have faced enormous challenges concerning staff recruitment and retention, food inflation, labour costs, cost of equipment maintenance and replacement, allied with food shortages and a huge increase in the number of special diets and allergens. We have had to work in increasingly creative ways to ensure that food provided is visually attractive, tasty, fresh, and, whilst meeting the needs of the individual child, also meeting the mandatory school food standards. From our own catered experience and latest national member surveys, we know that food shortages and substitutions and the rising cost of ingredients has meant that catering teams across the country have had to make daily changes to menus with the knock-on effect of food safety and allergy management. This has also been the case where shortages of staff has led to a full menu offer not being achievable on some days. The report will tell you that England alone out of the 4 nations is significantly disadvantaged through poor and inadequate levels of funding for universal and benefit-based free school meals when compared to Wales, Scotland, and now London. And we've discussed this disparity on many occasions. But if the industry as a whole is to survive, we now need to address this shortfall. Continued underfunding for labour and ingredient costs will impact staffing structures and, as a consequence, the variety of food on the menus that can be provided. Potentially, as we have seen through later national surveys, there will be a further move to using more bought-in and processed food items to try and reduce labour costs by having less fresh food production. This will lead to lower staff welfare and job satisfaction and a de-skilling of the workforce when we need their skills the most. Reduced menu offers or a perceived reduction in quality by families will deliver lower levels of uptake of free and paid for meals, making services, whether they be in single-site schools, multi-academy trust or local authority areas, less economic and efficient, with core fixed costs staying the same or increasing whilst income and revenue fall short. The report sets out very clearly the current pressures facing school lunch provision across England, both from a funding and a cost perspective, but also staffing and customer engagement standpoint. The report sets out how the investment in school food is an investment in the future of our children and young people and the future of the country. Done well, school meals using fresh, seasonal, local, regional, British ingredients to create great tasting, fresh prepared hot school food also supports UK PLC, farmers, growers, producers and distributors. Read the report, share the content with your colleagues and peers, talk to your local representatives, councillors and MPs to make the case for protecting services and ensuring that this vital statutory service is funded appropriately and index linked going forward. Thank you, Stephanie.
Brad, thank you so much. I am now going to hand over to you. And I'm slightly distracted because I'm seeing some really good questions coming into the chat. So this is an opportunity for some of our speakers to respond to some of the questions. And I'm going to start, if it's okay, with one for Bethan. If Bethan is still there, maybe we can see our speakers on the screen because that would help me navigate. So Bethan, this is a really good one. Are you able to tell us a bit more about schools subsidising to make up for the funding gap? Have you got any examples of where money is being diverted from the school budget? Because that's obviously quite a compelling argument when we think about children's ability to learn.
I think it's about creating a balanced budget. So I think, as colleagues will know on the call, it's about not necessarily diverting money, but overall making sure your budget is balanced. So I think it's them looking at all aspects of the budget. There is a proportion that it can't be touched because it affects wages and salaries, but it's maybe looking at other resources. So maybe they're not putting as many books into the library as a consequence of this. It's looking at other things that aren't happening to support teaching delivery. If schools are therefore saying they're not going to affect quality of food, because I know one of the questions is maybe people are reducing the quality of their food to reduce the cost. But if schools aren't looking at reducing the quality and they want to maintain the quality, then they'll be having to make difficult decisions about where they take out other resources, or don't invest in new resources as a consequence of having to look at a balanced budget delivery.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Beth. And one of the things that came out of this is it not only is a funding gap having an impact on school budgets, but it's also locking us into, we're standing still, we're not striving, we're not being ambitious for our young people and for good nutrition. Another one which is really important, which I'm going to bring in Miles Bremner for this one. What does the report say about small schools, because small rural schools particularly, because obviously back in the school food plan we recognised that there was a bit of an income gap for small schools. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So when we analysed our data sets, and we used over 70 different data sets, we saw data from small schools, and it was really clear that the economics does not work for small schools, and still does not work for small schools 10 years on. So the report clearly calls for a small school subsidy to be re-established. And what we found is that the break-even sort of numbers has increased as well. So we now think that schools serving less than 150 school meals a day should be, should receive that extra small school subsidy.
That's really helpful. I'm just going to point out make a point about Maisie McBagley has come in with a question about quality, and it's really a question about comes back to our point about ring fencing and making sure that the funding we get ends up in good nutrition. So I just wondered whether, Brad, you want to just comment on that, just about, because we see fantastic work done on a very small budget. So just some thoughts about making sure that the funding we get ends up in good nutrition.
Yeah, I think Lisa, myself, all of us as school providers recognise that actually the school food standards should be monitored. There is no reason, if we're all required to deliver it, then we should be monitored in some way. How that happens across the multi-functional geography of England, where local authorities do or don't have school inspectors anymore, is a separate question. I think what would be really useful though, and what comes out of this report, and some of the things that Bethan said, is if everybody knows what the funding is for school catering, for school food, then we can all have an honest discussion about what it needs to be and make sure that the right amount of quality ingredients is on the plate, staff are recognised and paid well, and kitchen estates are able to be maintained. What I see regularly from tenders and specifications is that each of those specifications vary and are different depending on what that MAT or potentially the people they asked for a specification want to get out of it. And I think we have to have a baseline which says children should be fed well and fed properly, and this is the funding that's available.
That's really good. And we've got another question on quality actually from Russell Ball, which I'm actually going to put to Steve because I'm really interested in his thoughts on this. We know that school food needs to be monitored. We know that we want to make sure that our precious school food standards are adhered to. Do you think there's a role for Ofsted in all of this? Steve, sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, so now there's a question. I'm in constant conversation with Ofsted because I think that what you inspect is, I always say to Ofsted, an inspection isn't just an inspection. What Ofsted inspect determines what happens in a school and shapes, indeed, the entire curriculum in the end. So I do think there's a role for Ofsted. I don't think necessarily it's a role for them inspecting that, but but it's for them to think about the limits or the straitjacket that Ofsted create by inspecting and measuring the things that they do inspect. If I could say also, just to say, because Miles talked about rural schools, the truth is that any primary school finds it hard to make its budget mate. You talk to multi-academy providers. I was talking to one the other day and they said our secondary schools constantly subsidise our primary schools. Running any single form of entry primary school, it's almost impossible. And what we do constantly is we rely on Fair Share, that big charity that recirculates food that's not gone out of date. And various of our schools' nutritional input is supplemented by that. And also we develop food banks because we know that if we can't get all the nutrition in for children whilst they're in school, well, the other 50% of their nutrition comes from home, and we need to work with that. But this shouldn't come down to charity, should it? Government should pick this up and ensure that all of this is monitored.
Absolutely. The last thing we want is children to be fed by food distribution charities. We don't want to be
exactly
food aid nation. That would be a very poor outcome. So really, why we're talking about monitoring, inspection, we've got a really good question here about somebody has asked us about the maverick idea, perhaps, of adding a couple of p onto the meal price so that we can get some sort of monitoring and inspection happening through local authorities. I touched on it earlier. So, Miles, do you want to just talk about that a little further? Because I think you're the one that kicked off this conversation, which we all support. But tell us more about that.
Sure. So during conversations with the project advisory group, there was a sort of real recognition that alongside funding, we need to look at aspects of access for free school meals, and then we need to look at aspects of quality as well. And there was a feeling that sometimes debate and discussion within the school food sector can be about trade-offs and money trade-offs. And so the concept and idea of allocating 2p per meal, less than 1%, as a quality assurance mechanism to bake it into the funding rate. The question from that came through was, was this a sort of a marker in the report to prompt discussion, or is it an exactly calculated mechanism? It is a prompt to enable discussion, and to me, it's a good prompt because I think we shouldn't treat quality and the investment in a quality assurance mechanism separately from the funding. The two need to come together. The 2p rate was calculated based on examples of some local authorities that have invested in school food improvement officers that then support schools with sort of audits and helping to look at how schools are meeting the school food standards. So the 2p it's a notional amount. It's to prompt discussion. Lots of ways it could be done, but I hope it generates that discussion as we move forward.
Thanks, Miles. It's a really interesting idea. For those of you who've been around this for as long as some of us have, the school food plan in 2013, when it was published, had a chapter called "What Gets Measured Gets Done." And that bit still hasn't been done, unfortunately. So we see real, and Steve and I can argue about this at a different time, but I definitely see we need to persuade Sir Martin to maybe look at Ofsted's role in this, because I think there's a case for a carrot and stick in this, and it's all about complying with statutory regulations, and as we know, school food standards are a statutory requirement. So, but for another day. So, why we have Leah here from Minnesota, because she's got up very early to talk to us. I think it would be really nice just to find out just a little bit about the capital investment that had to come with your groundbreaking policy in Minnesota. So What sort of investment was needed to get the kitchens up to scratch to deal with the increasing numbers?
Yeah, so the way we fund things here, we have sort of a base funding for each meal, and that cost us about 1% of our education budget. So really relatively small, I think, investment in comparison to the outcomes. That is roughly equivalent to 200 million per year. And then actually all that we have invested so far is I think it's maybe around 2 million in what I referenced as the Farm to School program, which is on top of the base meal price, additional resources for schools that want to invest in kitchen equipment. There's specific grants around kitchen equipment and increasing, facilities that way. And then also an incentive per amount of locally sourced food, really just meaning from within the state of Minnesota. And so that actually, we would like to see that closer to 10 million. The demand far outstrips the resources currently available for our farm to school program. So that's really our next step, is that we want to fully invest in that. But roughly about 10 million is what we think that would cost us yearly.
That's really helpful, Leah. Before we go, we've got some very good questions in the chat about just some of the details. So this is good because we can bring in Abigail, who has been very important in this process, because she had to trawl through and analyze enormous amounts of data. So I'm going to chuck this question her way and hope that she can answer it for you. It's about overheads. If somebody's asking us about the 32p allocation for overheads, what does that cover? It's slightly related to Leah's comment about CapEx, but this one is about utilities, I would believe.
Well, yes and no. So one of the things that we found is, as it says in the report, that the complexities of what happens in each school arrangement vary. And so depending on how contracts are arranged and how budgets are organised, different aspects are held by different people within the process. But broadly, overheads, yes, does include utilities, but sometimes it's quite hard to extract them from the overall school budget, particularly to attribute to school food aspects. But it also includes things like other sundries, so things you might have like uniforms or software, and also things like disposables and cleaning materials, aspects of light equipment. Some schools also included bits about maintenance and repair within that. And then the capital expenditure, the major capital expenditure, sits outside of those overheads, and was not very few schools or contractors were able to provide us with specific figures on capital expenditure specifically related to school food.
Okay, well, that's really great, Abigail. Maybe that's the next report, but one step at a time. Okay, we have to wrap things up, but I just want, have we still got Sharon? Yes, we have. Hello, Sharon. We've obviously got to ask you this question. 30th of October. Come on, give us a preview. What can we see? Is there anything in the budget to make us all go away feeling hopeful or beyond the budget? Let's be optimistic.
Stephanie, what makes you think that I know the answer to what's in the budget?
It would be wrong of me not to ask.
Not to ask. You're as bad as all of those journalists out there that keep asking and asking and asking. And even if I was Rachel sitting here, I would say, I'm not telling you, you have to wait for me to. And I'm certainly not Rachel, so I certainly don't know what's in the budget. And even if I was, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So I'm with all of you guys, living in hope. We just keep hearing more bad news every day as each department sort of, my very good friend Andrew Gwyn's in the health department. I've got friends, in the Home Office who are now all ministers, and it's all I hear from them is how bad things are the more and more they uncover. So I know it's a broken record. You know, the last government left the country's economy and finances in a mess, and we've got to begin to sort that out. But you know, I'm ever hopeful that we will turn it around as soon as possible, so then we can start actually making some of the improvements that we all need and want to see. None of us came into politics to not try and make people's lives better, and especially children's lives better. And I noticed a chat, Matthew Knight in the chat said, will the free breakfast clubs be the end of the campaign for universal free school meals? Well, the answer, Matthew, is no. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Sharon, because I love that answer, and I'm going to stop you there so you can't say anything else. But I think I'm really, really grateful. I've got 2 minutes to wrap this up, and I just want to thank all of our speakers for participating today. I'm going to name them again: Brad Pierce, Miles Bremner and his colleague Abigail Page for digging into the data for us, to Bethan from ISBL for bringing in her expertise from her members, Leah from Minnesota for getting up so early to talk to us. Thank you. We're very grateful to you. And Steve Chalk, as ever, such a passionate speaker. And I think you've added huge value, bringing the voice of children to this conversation. Really, really important. So all I want to say is to you, to remind you that despite this report focusing on funding, we must look at the school food system in the round. We have to look at funding, we have to look at access, and we have to look at quality, and it needs to come together. So this is really just part 1 of 3, really. We will continue to campaign on all three areas to ensure that every pound invested ends up in good nutrition for children that need it most. I urge you to read the report. There's lots of really good detail in there. Please share it with your networks and stay in touch, because we will be answering your questions if you reach out to us. So I also want to have a cheeky thank you to my team at School Food Matters, particularly to Sav, who has been sitting on my left and making sure I keep on time and don't miss a good question, and the people at Carson Clay who have made the tech work. So thank you all. Keep in touch, keep fighting the good fight, and I'm pretty confident we're going to get there. So thank you. Bye-bye.